The Romans recorded almost everything. They wrote down how much grain a soldier received in his daily ration, the tax on a single jar of wine, the names of enslaved people, the price of a loaf of bread. They carved laws into stone and painted advertisements on the walls of their cities. There was almost nothing in their world too small or too ordinary to be written down. And yet, scattered across their empire, they left behind an object they never mentioned. Not once, not in a single letter, not in a single inventory list, not in a single mosaic or monument. When researchers recently turned modern analysis tools, including artificial intelligence, onto this strange 12-sided bronze object, they expected it would finally give up its secret. What they found instead was something nobody had predicted, and it may force us to rewrite a quiet chapter of the ancient world. But to understand why this small object has haunted archaeologists for nearly 300 years, you first have to see it clearly. Imagine a hollow shape made of bronze, roughly the size of a baseball, with 12 flat pentagonal faces. On every single face, someone carved a perfect circular hole. And here is the strange part. No two holes are the same size. Some are wide enough to push your finger through. Others are barely large enough for the tip of a pencil. And at each of the 20 points where the faces meet, there is a small, rounded knob, cast with such precision that the entire object can balance on any one of its faces. This was not an easy thing to make. Each one was created through a demanding technique called lost wax casting. A craftsman would carve the entire shape out of wax, surround it in clay, heat it until the wax melted and drained away, and then pour molten bronze into the empty mold that remained. It required enormous skill and expensive metal. Nobody would build something this difficult without a powerful reason. And yet here is the detail that has driven experts to the edge of madness for centuries. After all that effort, after all that expense, the object seems to have no obvious use. And the Romans, who wrote down almost everything, wrote nothing about it. The first one was discovered in 1739 in England. In the centuries since, around 130 more have surfaced. They have been pulled from muddy fields, riverbeds, and buried hoards across the cold northwestern edge of the Roman Empire, modern-day France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Britain, where 33 of them have been found so far. But there is a hole in that map, and it may be more revealing than the finds themselves. Not a single one has ever been uncovered in Italy, not in the city of Rome, not in North Africa, not on the Iberian Peninsula. They appear only in the damp, freezing northern provinces, places that were Roman in their administration, but still deeply Celtic in their bones. And once you sit with that fact, it becomes impossible to let go, because it raises a question that historians rarely like to ask out loud. Were these objects ever truly Roman at all? For a long time, the mystery was completely stuck. Most of these dodecahedra were found by pure accident. A farmer turning soil, a hobbyist swinging a metal detector. They were ripped from the ground with no context, no record of what surrounded them, what they were buried beside, or why they were placed there. You could hold the object in your hands and still have no idea what story it belonged to. Then, in the summer of 2023, everything shifted. A small group of amateur archaeologists in the quiet English village of Norton, Disney, were digging near an ancient Roman road. They believed it might be their last useful day of excavation, and then they uncovered one of the largest and most perfectly preserved dodecahedra ever found. It was roughly 1,700 years old, and it was completely, stunningly undamaged. This time, the discovery was different. This was no random find in an empty field. It was a careful, controlled excavation, layered with Roman pottery and coins that dated it with precision. And the object itself began to speak. Analysis showed it was made of about 75% copper, 7% tin, and 18% lead. That much lead would make the metal brittle, a strange and costly choice for any practical tool. And there was something else. It showed almost no wear at all. No scratches, no dents. No sign that anything had ever been pushed through those holes or wrapped around those knobs. So what was it? Over the years, people have offered more than 30 different explanations. Some claimed it was a military rangefinder, that a soldier could peer through the holes to judge the distance to an enemy across the battlefield. It sounds clever, but the objects come in wildly different sizes, with no standardization at all. An empire that built roads straight across an entire continent would never hand out measuring tools where every single one measured differently. Others insisted they were candle holders, different holes for candles of different thicknesses. The problem? Many of them have open bases, meaning any melting wax would simply pour straight through, and not a single one shows scorch marks, soot, or any heat damage whatsoever. Then came the theory that finally captured the public imagination. A skilled craftsperson noticed that the knobs looked almost exactly like the pegs on a modern knitting spool. Perhaps, the idea went, you could wrap yarn around those knobs and guide it through the holes to knit the fingers of gloves. For a brief moment, it felt like the answer. These objects only appear in cold northern provinces after all. Gloves would matter there. But there was a catch, and it sank the whole theory. The Romans did not knit. The earliest solid evidence of knitting appears centuries after the Roman Empire had already collapsed, and not one of these objects has ever shown a single trace of wool or thread. Every practical theory kept crashing into the same brick wall. So researchers started asking an entirely different question. What if we have been assuming this object was practical at all? In the philosophy of Plato and Pythagoras, geometric shapes carried deep meaning. The tetrahedron stood for fire, the cube stood for earth, and the dodecahedron, the 12-sided form, was believed to represent the whole, the universe itself, the boundless fifth element that contained all the others. Some scholars now believe these objects were never tools. They were symbols, talismans, portable windows into something far larger than the people who held them. And the Norton Disney find began to point somewhere even more unexpected. This dodecahedron was not alone in the ground. It was buried beside a small figurine of a mounted rider god, the exact kind of object found again and again on ancient temple sites. Others have turned up inside coin hoards, next to valuable offerings, and even in the graves of women. When modern residue analysis and new imaging techniques were finally turned on these objects, the picture only deepened. These were not worn-out household items tossed aside. They were cherished, carefully placed, deliberately buried, treated in every way as objects of real power. Which brings us back to that question historians prefer to avoid. These objects appear only in Celtic heartlands living under Roman rule. Never in Rome itself. Never in the warm south. When all of this evidence is laid out together, a strange and unsettling possibility rises to the surface. The so-called Roman dodecahedron may never have been Roman. It may have belonged to the very people Rome conquered. The Romans were famously superstitious. They built their decisions around omens and signs, but they were also ruthless about controlling any practice they considered dangerous, especially divination, prophecy, and ritual tied to the dead. If these objects were used in Celtic ceremonies, the empire had every reason to tolerate them quietly in private hands, and every reason to never, ever record them in official writing. That silence, stretching across every Roman document that has survived to us, may not be an accident at all. It may be the single most important clue we have. Think about what that means. For nearly 300 years, we have called this the Roman dodecahedron. We stamped the name of the conqueror onto it. We searched Roman military manuals and Roman engineering texts for its purpose. And we may have been searching in the wrong empire entirely. The object may be a quiet survivor of a conquered culture, a fragment of belief that outlived the armies that tried to bury it, each one lying in the cold soil of Gaul and Britannia, holding a story the empire chose never to write down. And this is the true gift of a mystery like this one. It reminds us that history is not only what was recorded, it is also, and perhaps more powerfully, what was deliberately left out. The voices that were never granted ink and stone, the traditions that survived in secret, encoded in bronze, waiting in the frozen earth for someone patient enough to dig. So here is the question I will leave with you. If the Romans went to such lengths to erase this object from their records, what else might be buried beneath our assumptions, quietly waiting to rewrite everything we believe about the ancient world? I want to hear your answer. Drop it in the comments below. If this story moved something inside you, share it with someone who loves history as much as you do. And subscribe, because the next mystery we uncover might just be the one that changes how you see the past forever. Until next time, keep questioning, keep digging, and never accept that the story is finished. I am Arif Hasan, and this is AH History.